Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first episode of TAY, Talk Amongst Yourself, of 2021. My name is Tanaka Mundo, and it's a pleasure to be in your company. Show's looking a little bit different. Yeah, I've had to go underground just for a bit. Results have not gone my way at the surface, nor have the predictions. And now we're here. But as they say, the show must go on, right? We'll do it this way until at least I have some modicum of respect at the surface. So let's see how it goes in the weeks to come. So for just a few moments, we'll talk about some of the biggest moments in sport this past weekend. I can't, of course, not say anything about Liverpool. A couple of people were surprised when I was quite pleased at the result. I had literally no qualms with losing to Manchester United, maybe because I don't really care too much for FA Cups, in all honesty, but also because at least in that game, there were signs of life. We scored, number one. Number two, Firmino, without being great, he looked good. Salah looked sharp. Defensively, it was shambles. But there were things that we could take away from that game and be like, okay, we can work on this. So that's the last thing I'll say about Liverpool and Manchester United. Congratulations to the Reds, or rather to Manchester United. You guys deserved it. And yeah, go on. Let's see how it goes. It's called being a gentleman. It's one of my New Year's resolutions, is being, humble in defeat and in victory. That's what I'm trying to do this year. So there we have it. It's a more mature me. This is my character arc now. UFC 257. Yeah, first pay-per-view of the year for the UFC. Where do we begin, man? Michael Chandler, he was exceptional against Dan Hooker. I would never have bet that that's the way the fight would have went, to be honest. And granted, maybe it was a fool's bet to make because I knew nothing, or not too much rather, about Michael Chandler, despite what I've seen, little clips on YouTube and stuff. But yeah, I didn't expect it to go that way. He's definitely put the whole roster on notice and the world on notice, really, because now, to be honest, I'm starting to feel like maybe Michael Chandler could possibly be the best challenger to Khabib because of his wrestling. Different to Justin Gaethje in that he would probably use it more offensively than Justin Gaethje would. That Khabib fight is all you have to look back at. I think Michael Chandler may possess a different set of challenges for Khabib, but nothing that I don't think Khabib can't beat. I am now fully on the Khabib train and it hurts, but I'm here. So Conor McGregor comes out, he loses to Dustin Poirier. Firstly, I must also give credit to Dustin Poirier for making tactical adjustments in the build-up to that fight. I think he knew, because of his slow start and because of how quick McGregor starts, we saw it against Cowboy Cerrone last year this time, it's best to tie him up as soon as possible. Conor was landing in the first 60 seconds of the fight. Then Justin gets the takedown, puts him up against the fence, they wrestle for a little bit. And I think what that then did is allow Justin to cool himself, get into the fight. It didn't tire out anybody. I don't think that was the point. I think the point was just to get over or through those first couple of moments when Conor can overwhelm and he fights so aggressively on the front foot. So tactical adjustments were made, and then he starts eating off with the calf kick, just chomping at Conor's front leg. And you could see poor old Conor try to make adjustments as the fight was going on, but he had no idea what he was dealing with. And it showed. And to his credit, he said it after the fight. Those leg kicks did it. That was his undoing, and he had no idea. He had never experienced that feeling before. He had never felt what it's like to be kicked in the calf like that, which goes to show that Conor McGregor has truly been away from the sport almost long enough for him to have missed the resurgence, and I don't know if there will ever be a decline of the calf kick, but to have missed the resurgence of one of the most used offensive attacks in mixed martial arts. It's been about 5 years, maybe 5 or 4 years since the calf kick was revolutionized. And don't get me wrong, it's been part of combat sports for a while. But over the past couple of years, we've really started to see guys use it, especially those dudes from AT&T. And Conor McGregor had no answers, and it showed. And you get the sense that while he's been away, and this was my feeling, why that loss hurt me a little bit more than it probably should have, because I've watched Conor lose before. But when he lost previously, you always got the sense that this is something he can come back from. What I don't believe is true now is that Conor's skill set, at least right now, is on par with the guys around him. I just think so many of them now, in the past 4 years that Conor McGregor has been absent, despite being present. I mean, fighting 3 times in 5 years is almost nothing, even if you look at the octagon time. I think the level has risen slightly to a level where Conor is not, taking calf kicks, etc. You know, and that's why I'm worried. I'm worried because, first and foremost, before we talk anything else, before we talk about the 30-foot yacht and all the other reasons why Conor may not fare well anymore in the UFC, it's just, I think the level ever so slightly has risen. And don't get me wrong, Conor's an elite athlete, but I do believe he is 1 or 2 steps behind everybody else at the moment. And by everybody, I mean the dudes right at the top, right? Where Dustin Poirier is, where even Justin Gaethje is, and Michael Chandler now. And look, it was a different approach that Conor McGregor took in the build-up, right? It's, okay, I'm not going to be... Oh, he's matured. And that was evident. He's not the brash man that he used to be. But I thought at the very least, he would be something similar to the Conor we all fell in love with. He took a different approach, and it showed. It showed. And the question is, and actually how Max Kellerman put it, is there's a difference between wanting to win and needing to win. And it's evident that Conor falls in the wanting to win. And that's the thing. That could be the difference right there. It may not be a difference, a tangible difference in skill set, but a difference in mentality. I mean, we've all heard the saying, Marvin Hagler said, "Oh, it's difficult to wake up at 5 a.m. when you're sleeping in silk sheets or silk robes." And we've heard even Sugar Ray Leonard say, there comes a point where you just don't want to take that punch anymore. And where Conor is mentally, I don't know. But it makes it very interesting for the UFC in terms of what happens next. He wants to fight Dustin Poirier again. I don't want to see that fight. I think the best fight to get Conor going again will be Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz will probably bring out that side of Conor again, that burning fire side again, just because of how Nate Diaz is. Probably the best fight to make. I don't see, or don't want to see really, Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier 3 this year. Especially if they're looking at May potentially as the date for a title, because it doesn't look like Khabib will be coming back. So if you're asking me for my money, you make Charles Oliveira v Dustin Poirier for the title. I think you put Michael Chandler in there against Justin Gaethje in almost, tournament style. Whoever wins there is next for the title. And then you possibly could make, let's assume you can't make Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor. Then you possibly could make, in my mind at least, you could make Dan Hooker, Conor McGregor. You could make Tony Ferguson even, Conor McGregor, possibly, if you're trying to give him a fight to just kind of a fight that he could potentially win, although those guys are still no slouches. Paul Felder's in there as well, possibly. But certainly it's tougher to book Conor now, at least in my mind, than it was prior to this fight. There's just not a lot of options that I think are there right where he wants to be, which is fighting for the title. I don't think there's an option that will get him right back there. I think he may have to go through 2 fights now before finding himself back in title contention. So it could be Nate Diaz and somebody else before he gets there. But I'm nervous. Okay, so Conor loses. You've seen the memes. It hurts every time. He had his eye on boxing Manny Pacquiao, and these are the ramifications of that loss, because it doesn't seem like that Manny Pacquiao fight is going to happen. It seems as if, though, Manny Pacquiao is rather going to fight Ryan Garcia, 22-year-old, Mexican guy with all the good looks to go and the social media following. It seems that's the route Manny Pacquiao is going to take. I don't know whether that fight can do the numbers that he possibly could have done with McGregor, but it will be a big fight, no doubt. I think Garcia has enough of a following, and particularly how he fought Luke Campbell, is enough there to make that fight big for the both of them. So I'm looking forward to that fight. But ultimately, we won't see Conor versus Pacquiao, and I don't believe Pacquiao will fight twice in a year. I think he'll fight once. There is no date. There is no contract. It's not set in stone that he's going to fight Ryan Garcia, but that's at least what Ryan Garcia is putting out on social network, that fight is all but agreed. I think Pacquiao fights once if he does fight. I certainly think maybe for another time we can talk about my permutations for that particular fight, but I think Pacquiao comes good against Ryan Garcia without saying too much about it. So there it goes. Conor McGregor's ticket into the boxing spaces is now gone, and possibly he will have to settle down and focus all his energies fully in these UFC spaces. And maybe then, if he really maybe gets the fights that he needs this year, 3, possibly 2 more, maybe, we'll start to see the Conor in which we all remember. Maybe. I guess time will tell. So, let's talk a bit of Football, yeah. Tottenham played Wycombe Wanderers yesterday. Gareth Bale scored the equaliser. Ultimately, they won 4-1. The results certainly did flatter them. The scoreline flattered them. Not maybe the result, but definitely the scoreline. I think Wycombe were good, in part. As good as you can be when you're David v Goliath. And I know it's a terrible analogy because Goliath ultimately lost, but outside of the spiritual spaces where Goliaths usually beat Davids, they were good. But Gareth Bale was interesting in particular because that was his first 90 minutes, full 90 minutes since joining Tottenham. His first 90 minutes is coming in January. He's played a couple of games here and there off the bench, but never completed. He scored 1 goal in the Premier League, and we are down to, 4 months before the season is over? And the question is, and I think it's a simple answer, has Gareth Bale's loan deal to Tottenham worked? The answer is absolutely not. And I don't think we'll go too far and wide to find anybody who disagrees with that. The question then becomes, what happens next for Gareth Bale? His future certainly is not at Real Madrid. I don't think Tottenham can afford to put up the type of wages that Gareth Bale would want at about $350,000 a week. And you don't get the sense that because of the season he's had with them, there would be any interest in loaning Gareth Bale back. I believe Bale was completely an emotional move for Tottenham. I believe that at that time, the thinking may have been fans would be back in the stadium. I really do believe that would have lifted Tottenham, at least at that level, where fans play a role in home games and in particular, because he was that beloved. And really, he's an absolute star, is Gareth Bale, when he's fit and when he can get running. But it's unfortunate that that's been far and few between, those moments in the most recent years because of his injury crisis. And ultimately, Tottenham didn't get that. And now what they're stuck with is a dude who they're splitting 50 down the middle, 50% of his wages. He's on 175,000 at Tottenham. And that's only because they're paying half with Real Madrid. And ultimately, it hasn't worked. China is no longer an option, rarely for Gareth Bale, because of how they've changed the laws of football there, which is why you see some of the internationals who they signed making their way back into Europe. It's an untenable situation in China at the moment. America, I don't think he has that type of money. So what happens with Gareth Bale, who is one of the world's biggest stars, certainly the world's biggest talents, but ultimately, like a few before him and so many others, injuries are threatening to write the narrative of Gareth Bale's career. Don't get me wrong. When we talk about Gareth Bale, we'll talk about a club legend at Tottenham. We'll talk about someone who elevated Real Madrid, certainly. But again, these last couple of years, and it could be recency bias, have been tough on Bale and on all his beloved fans. And I only say this because I really don't have the answer. I'm repeating the question so much because I'm hoping at some point a light bulb will go out, and I suppose this is why we have these conversations, to engage with each other. What then should happen with Gareth Bale? Tottenham? Possibly he should aim higher, maybe? PSG? Potentially, should they lose Mbappe to Real Madrid? I'm just throwing out ideas there. Because I've asked myself this question the entire day and tried to sit on it and come up with suggestions, but I really cannot. It's been a torrid time for Gareth Bale, bad business for Tottenham. They've lost upside of 20 million in this deal. It's a loan deal. And I don't think they'll go and do it again. So send help please in the comment section. What should happen with Gareth Bale? That's the big question. So Tottenham played out, they beat Wycombe Wanderers. All the best to them as they continue in their FA Cup campaign. I think it's a competition Jose will want to win. Because I think at this stage, Tottenham just needs something in by way of silverware. Just to gain some semblance of respect back. Just a little bit. Something. Anything. So all the best to them in their pursuit of silverware. Frank Lampard got the sack. And it's quite exciting, isn't it? Both London teams, Frank gets the sack. And this one kind of caught the football world by surprise, which really, for me, I wasn't too moved. Now, to be fair, on this show, I predicted Frank Lampard. Actually, I predicted it would be Mikel Arteta and then Frank Lampard. Or rather, Mikel Arteta, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. And I really had nothing to say about Frank Lampard. What I did predict, however, is I didn't foresee Chelsea getting into the top 4. I just thought it was too much at one time for an inexperienced manager. And it showed. It really did show. Now, here's the interesting comparison. Frank Lampard has the lowest points per game record of any Chelsea manager. In fact, I'll pull up the stats right now. in case you're thinking, oh man, are you sure? I think it's well documented of any Chelsea manager. So it goes Frank Lampard, all right, at 1.67 in the 57 games that he's played. He has a win percentage of 49%. That's just one higher than Andres Villas-Boas, who has a better points per game record, but a lower win percentage at 48%. From then on, it's all downhill for Frank because he's bettered by Claudio Ranieri, Roberto Di Matteo, Gus Hiddink, Scolari, Benitez, Ancelotti, Conte, Mourinho, all the way up until Avram Grant, who had a 2.31 points per game. And of course, within there, the win percentages vary. But you have to look at Andres Villas-Boas, who, ironically, we just spoke Tottenham, coached at Tottenham as well. Remember when Andres Villas-Boas came from Porto and there was all that excitement around him, and Chelsea even went as far as to pay the 15 million euro release clause for Andres Villas-Boas, and he was kind of pitched to us as the change at Chelsea. He was pitched to us as the long-term plan. All right, young manager, one of Europe's best at the time. He's going to come in and almost do what Mourinho did. Stick around for a bit. You know, and I say what Mourinho did not because he was there for a long time, but because in comparison to everybody else, it seems like eons, right? That's just the reality. He got the 212 games. The next best is Claudio Ranieri. He was before the Roman Abramovich era at 146. The next best within that era is 76. That's Carlo Ancelotti. My goodness. So that's what happened with Andres Villas-Boas. Now, the lesson here for Chelsea and why I'm not surprised is because Andres Villas-Boas got, if not the same amount of time, maybe slightly less than Frank Lampard, with a better win percentage. It's marginal, but still better. So this result, and knowing who Roman Abramovich is, was to be expected. I think the tears are just because club legend, I understand it's close to the heart, this one. Even for us who don't necessarily support Chelsea, love the narrative, right? Dude who was great at the club comes back and succeeds. Silverware, and it's great. But ultimately it wasn't meant to be. I have no qualms with the sacking of Frank Lampard because this is Chelsea's business model. If it were anywhere else, I would have probably been a lot more confused. Slightly confused that Thomas Tuchel's the man that they were so desperate to go and get. Looking at his record early on, he won, Pokal over in Germany. Naturally, he swept Ligue 1 with PSG. His best achievement to date would probably be runners-up in the UEFA Champions League. But again, for me, I don't think he's a guarantee to make this work. Now, here's the big error that Chelsea made. And it's a similar error in which Tottenham made, which is ironic. Both London clubs making the same mistakes. You swear someone would have been smart enough to look over to their neighbour and say, this is not what we should be doing. So here's the story. Gareth Bale included. Tottenham sell Gareth Bale. They go out on a spending spree. They bring in Soldado, Eriksson. Eric Lamela came in with that bunch as well. There was Chilicas, the defender, forgive me for pronunciation, and a few others who came as well, if you remember. And ultimately, it didn't work. What they thought they would do is lose one player and supplement the loss of that one player with 6 different other players in different positions. So we will lose one and bolster the entire team with the funds that we get from him. But that strategy didn't work for Tottenham, and it has not worked for Chelsea. I was so confident that Chelsea would not make the top 4 under Frank Lampard because I believe that for however great all the players they were bringing in, none of those players were Premier League proven. It's a different environment entirely. Not Ziyech, not Timo Werner, not Kai Havertz, none of them were Premier League proven. And this is where I had my reservation, outside of Ben Chilwell, of course, who's been good for Chelsea, it must be said. They brought in Thiago Silva, and I thought there could potentially be where they turn the screw defensively and get better because they were abysmal last year. I think 6th worst defensive record in the Premier League. It ultimately didn't happen. But for that reason alone, I'm not even going to act to you like or pretend like I had a silver ball. For that reason alone, I thought it wouldn't work out for Frank Lampard at Chelsea this season. I thought it was too much too soon for an inexperienced manager to handle so many major changes. They essentially changed the whole attacking trident from what they had last season. All right? Almost, or rather they did. They changed the core, the spine of that team in one season. It was too much too soon, as it was for Villas-Boas over at Tottenham. It was too much for Chelsea. Maybe they would have fared better with sticking with the youth, the people who got them into the top 4 ever so slightly. sticking with the youth. Granted, you have to progress. Maybe. These are just maybes now. We're talking in retrospect here. I do believe some of the deals had to be made, but I also believe it was just too much. Too much too soon. I think Tottenham definitely got worse players than Chelsea did. But again, those were players with high ceilings, possibly as well. Lamela was coming off a very good season. And there was no disputing the fact that there was potential in that side to do really well. So, alas, okay. That's what's been happening in your world of sport. I don't know. So maybe I'll leave questions. Was the sacking of Lampard fair? Number 1. Number 2, what should happen with Gareth Bale? Number 3, if you're a matchmaker, where do you put Conor McGregor? And number 4, do you want to see Ryan Garcia up against Manny Pacquiao? 4 questions. Jump into the comment section and do what we do on this show. Talk amongst yourselves. Until next time.